All right, let's take you to this now. Russian President Vladimir Putin has won the elections. The Central Election Commission in Moscow has declared that Putin won a record 88% of the vote with a new 6-year term, cementing his grip on power. The former KGB officer has overtaken Soviet leader Joseph Stalin as Russia's longest-serving leader in more than 200 years. Now, SABC News correspondent Dasha Chernyshova joins us live now. Dasha, thank you so much for your time. I mean, it was a result that some expected. How has been the reaction on the ground?
Well, to be honest, everybody expected this result, and even before the voting started, the outcome was very widely known. Now we do have the information from the Central Election Commission that 87% of the Russians have voted for Vladimir Putin in this year's presidential election. It is a record for Vladimir Putin himself, but another record has been set in terms of the turnout, which has reached 77%. That means that that millions of Russians actually came to the polling stations to cast their ballot. According to the head of the Central Election Commission, that was made possible thanks to the extension of the voting to 3 days instead of just one, and also thanks to the so-called online mobile voting system, which gave the opportunity for Russians to cast their ballots online. As to how it is perceived here on the ground, now obviously it is a done deal. The final results will be announced on Thursday, but no significant changes that could affect somehow the outcome are expected. For many Russians who supported Vladimir Putin, who were worried that probably he could not be once again re-elected, that is probably a relief. But for the vast majority of Russians, it means continuity is preserved. They have been expecting this result, but now they also understand that there is a lot of work to do, a lot of work ahead of the Russian president. And this is something that Putin himself was speaking about after the early results were announced last night. He did say that all the promises that have been made now need to be implemented. He outlined before the program for the upcoming term for the next 6 years and launched several new national projects, including one which concerns the family, saying that the poverty in the country has to be eliminated and that the birth rate has to increase. So now the understanding is that the stability has been preserved and that Russia will be taken on the course of what is seen here in the country as stable development.
And I wonder then, what about some of the dissenting voices? Have those been loud, given what, of course, has been said even in the public domain about some of those who are, watching this with much disapproval?
Well, indeed, we have heard some voices of discontent. There have been dozens of arrests made throughout the 3 days of this voting. First, we've seen people trying to pour dye into the ballot boxes, obviously in an act of protest. Moscow reacted to those acts, saying that it is the Western countries that are inciting extremism in Russia. But also we have seen the so-called None Against Putin protest that was staged by the supporters of the late Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, labeled terrorist in Russia. When people showed up to the polling stations, they were just lining outside those polling stations just to make the visible picture that there are people who disagree with the ongoing course of the government. The idea was that obviously, as protesting is largely a not safe endeavor in Russia, this is the act of protest that is very hard to be prohibited, because people just came to the polling stations trying to overwhelm them. So indeed, these voices have been seen also outside the Russian Federation. We have got some interesting results in terms of the polling. We understand that in some places, for instance in London, the layout for the presidential election has been completely different, while in Russia you could say that Vladimir Putin leads at almost all the polling stations. Outside the country, Vladislav Davankov, the representative of the New People Party, was leading at several of them. In London, he garnered over 50% of the votes. For instance, in Poland, in Warsaw, in Prague, the same picture. So interestingly, we understand that that was a sort of protest voting when the electorate was trying to cast their ballot for the candidates that they believe has more chances to be at least in somehow of opposition to the ongoing course. So interesting results have been shown from several polling stations, but the general idea is indeed that the voices of dissent, the voices of those who are discontent, they are in the minority in Russia.
All right, Dasha, thank you so much for that update. Do appreciate it. That is SABC News correspondent Dasha Chernyshova coming to us live from Moscow.